Hello, I'm trying something a little bit different today on my YouTube channel. Usually it's just me talking to you usually being nobody. But today I'm actually interviewing somebody pretty incredible. It's my agent, Mark Gottlieb, and I'm not just calling him incredible because I'm being self-serving here. He is legitimately an awesome guy. He's made my career what it is. I've got another book coming up here in just a few days. So I thought it'd be an awesome time to touch base with him and maybe introduce you guys to some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on when I'm alone out here churning out books. So, Mark, how are you tonight?
Hey James, I'm good. Thanks for letting me stop by and say hello on the show.
So, Mark Gottlieb has been my agent since I believe it was it 2016, right after I went viral on Twitter. You reached out and contacted me, and we can kind of go through that story and all that fun stuff. Before we do that, I'm going to steal a page from my nemesis Steve Olivas' playbook here. Give me 2 minutes on Mark Gottlieb. Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
So I work as a literary agent at the Trident Media Group in New York City. It's like you could say a literary agency is like a talent agency for authors. We do for authors what a movie company out west would do for actors, only we're specific to book publishing. And so, like yourself, I work with an array of different authors in various spaces between fiction and nonfiction, adult books, children's books, and graphic novels.
I've always, I guess, for a while when I was on the outside looking in, when I was trying to get a book deal, and I was researching how to query and all those kind of things. Like you were one of the mythical figures, the agents. Like everybody wants to get in touch with you because you are the gatekeepers to the book deals, and people are always trying to bang down your doors. Now, when people send in queries for books, do you actually open all of those personally, or do you have a layer of minions before you that screens that out?
So I actually read all my query letters myself
Oh.
because it's not that I don't trust other people. It's just there's a certain level of comfort to that, and they come right to my inbox, so they're right there. And it's not like I have to read them all the way through. I guess for your viewers, a query letter is like a cover letter for an author in their book, and so you can tell right away, like in the first sentence, if it's good or not.
Really, that's all it takes. Just that first sentence usually tips you off if you're going to keep reading.
I mean, I'll give it more of a chance than that,
I
but
guess
it's not
I
that
guess
brutal.
if you can't write one good sentence, I guess there's really no reason to read a few paragraphs. I guess that is when the entire litmus test is writing. I got to say, in the years when I was before I got to the point where I was writing books, I read hundreds of samples on how to write a query letter. And when it finally came down to it, I didn't write a single query letter, not one. I went viral on Twitter, and Mark reached out to me, and then we had a Skype interview in which my kids interrupted us about 15 times. They're running in and out of the room. They suddenly had to have my attention right then, and that was the kickoff of it. I've with Mark, I'm under contract for 7 books. For the third one's about to come out
Oh
here.
my gosh,
But
yeah.
in all that time, we have never met face to face. This is how all of our interactions have been, by video, by phone, by text, by email. So it's a different era. If you're thinking that you have to be one of those people who moves to New York and is a starving artist, it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. I have yet to leave Indianapolis, and Mark hasn't made his way out here, and it's working just fine.
Yeah, James, you were like the guy who never had to study before the exam, you know. You you could put out some funny tweets and then the next thing we know, there's 7 books later.
Yeah, it worked out, and you were really prescient too on that because you got in touch with me and you beat everybody else by like a week or two. Right after you got in touch with me, like 3 or 4 other agents got in touch with me right after that. None of them were as cool as you. None of them were as good as you. Out my light died up there, but yeah, it was kind of a big rush there when everything went viral. And what happened? For those of you who haven't been around a long time, my Twitter account, BuzzFeed ran an article on me, and I jumped from 200,000 followers to 500,000 followers over almost a weekend, and it never slowed down after that. Well, I guess till now. I guess I didn't get infinite followers. At some point it leveled out, but it didn't slow down for a very long time. And that's how when Mark got in touch with me, and everybody wanted me to write just a book of tweets, kind of like that book Stuff My Dad Says.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? I want to write a parent's guide to the zombie apocalypse, and Mark came along for the ride on that. So
I was all for it. you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I should be grateful for that or curse your name, but it worked out pretty well. I don't know. I don't know that everybody would have taken a chance on that, but you certainly did. When you're reading through these query letters, like how many of those do you get a day?
Oh my God. I mean, sometimes across the whole agency, there are probably hundreds that are coming in a day. I read them and then I delete them as I go if it's not for me.
Uh huh.
There's an automatic response for people who send them, but there could be hundreds. And so we call down that list, and only really the cream rises to the top. I think, what happened for you, James, was I was at home. My wife was in the other room. She was reading BuzzFeed, and she came across an article that they had written about you,
Yeah.
and she was laughing hysterically. And I thought, okay, if this is going to be the reaction of readers to James, then this is perfect. I mean, that's a very like visceral kind of reaction you have, and it's the same thing I get if I read a query letter that's really good and speaks to me. Um, so I could see that in someone else.
I thank your wife for her low standards. Certainly helped me along there. How often do you then, from those query letters, how often do you request a full manuscript? Would you say, like out of every 100 letters, do you request one, or out of every 50? Is there a rough ratio you can give me?
I'd say maybe 1 in 100 what might get a request for a manuscript, and then of those, you have to take like another, possibly even another 100
Oh,
to see
really?
if something is publishable. It's a difficult marketplace. There's a high level of standard to these books. I mean, you're an anomaly because not only did I approach you about writing a book, most people when they're approached to write a book, they need a co-writer or a ghostwriter, and you were able to write this yourself. Like it.
I would have quit social media if I was forced to have a ghostwriter. I did this also I could write. If I couldn't be trusted with that simple task, I would have bounced out of there. So ghostwriters are really that common then.
I think so because that helps lend a lot of I'm gonna use a big word, provenance for publishers. They feel more comfortable. Like, hey, there's a seasoned writer attached to this. But I think you already had a background in writing some screenplays, and obviously online with the tweets, like it was very, very natural, and with the comic book work you had done too. So it all came across well. I thought when I mentioned to you, like, would you be up for writing this? I thought you might just feel daunted and ask for a
No.
co-writer or ghostwriter. But that's
No.
yeah, it worked out well. You don't have to split the proceeds with with anyone.
Yeah, this had been my master plan all along. I started out I started out in journalism at a newspaper. I thought I'd be the next Dave Barry. I quit that right away. I could not. Me and journalism were not a good fit. That was not going to work out. I went to a just kind of a generic job in a cubicle, and I wrote on my own. And I started blogging, and it's very similar to these newsletters I send out now. The only difference is back when I was blogging, nobody read them. I would write like 1,000 word article a day, and I would get like 50 reads. And I wrote 300,000 words on this blog. I mean, for reference, the books I've written here, my first three, I think, were 40,000 words, 50,000 words, and 60,000 words. This was, and those cost money, but this was 300,000 words I put out there for free, and I couldn't get anybody to read it. And then to drive traffic to those 300,000 words, I switched to Twitter, and I started trying to send links, and I was like, oh no, I have to put native content out there. I started writing jokes and started building a following on Twitter, and gradually, as Twitter is wont to do, it just kind of took over my life, and that's where everything was. But it was all a very deliberate scheme. So when you entered the picture about a book, it took me full circle. That was back where I had wanted to get all along. If you do a ghostwriter though, so how does that work then? You just split the money? Is it usually 50-50, or you pay him a flat fee? Or I guess it's probably like anything in publishing, there's probably all kinds of deals out there.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. And before I do that, just to put it into perspective for your viewers, you mentioned 300,000 words. I mean, normal book length is 80 to 120,000 words, so
Yeah.
that's like multiple books right there. I would say, as to the co-writer or ghostwriter, usually they split the proceeds evenly. Maybe if there's a primary author, the primary author gets like 60% of the proceeds in exchange for covering the co-writer or ghostwriter's expenses. And then sometimes there's like a fee up front for the co-writer or ghostwriter, and that's recouped like from first proceeds of like the profits on the book, basically. Um, so there are a few different ways you can kind of slice that pie.
It's I will say this too though. The nice thing about comedy writing is the books all tend to be shorter. There's only so much of a comedy writer you can take. So if you're writing epic fantasy, you'll get into those 90 or 100,000 word
Oh,
books. But
yeah.
if you're writing jokes, you can keep it quite a bit shorter, especially if you put stick figure comics in there. Not that I would ever stoop that low, but you can shorten it quite a bit with that and make it more manageable. One thing, we had an interesting conversation earlier this year, and it wasn't information I'd heard anywhere else. Because I think the dream of every writer, or at least the dream of most writers, is to just exclusively write books. That's the point
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing more and more online is people are doing more of a hybrid. Like with me, I've got my social media stuff. So maybe I run ads and I write books, and then I do some freelance writing and stuff like that. It's kind of a combination. But I think you told me, and maybe this isn't still true, but you've got, how many clients do you have? Roughly 60 or 80, or what's the number right now?
I think me personally, I probably have several dozen
Okay,
clients.
I shot high, but didn't you tell me that none of them are exclusively full-time book writers? They all have something else they do in combination with that.
That's right. So at any given time, an author there could be an author who has vertigo and they're chained to a desk and it's like they're writing multiple books a year. But then there are other authors who might only write one book in their entire lifetime or, a book every 10 years or so. So they're all at different stages in their career.
Yeah, that's the To Kill a Mockingbird approach. You write one book ever and not another word, and just make millions off that. I would, if I could pull that off with one book, I would gladly give up writing and just float on the proceeds. Let's be honest here. I'm just here to sell out. That's the goal.
Well, you mentioned selling out. I mean, Harper Lee had written Go Set a Watchman, which was something of a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird. It was never meant to be published. I think it was put in
Yeah,
like a bank vault. And then
yeah.
after she died, I think her literary estate, those representatives, they published the book probably against her wishes.
Yeah,
Um,
I was really fascinated by that story, and it might even be a little bit more morbid than that. It sounded like it might not have even been a full sequel. It might have almost been a draft or like another
yeah.
iteration of. But yeah, she wasn't even dead when they published it. What happened is her sister, the
Hmm.
caretaker, passed away,
Hmm.
who had kind of been guarding her, and Harper Lee may have been senile or had dementia by that point. And then look at this, we suddenly have a new book coming out. Now there's nobody to protect her. Now again, I have no firsthand knowledge of any of this. Please don't sue me. I'm just repeating what I read places. But yeah, it makes you wonder. It reinforces why some authors, when they're working on things, at the end they're like, just burn everything I have that's a work in progress. And I get that sentiment, because I just got done. I actually just right before we started this video, I sent a manuscript for my fourth book. I sent it off to Mark and I sent it off to Ben Bella Books, the publisher for that one. But had I stopped a draft earlier and been really ill, I would have told them to burn it, because it was just unreadable. I don't want people to think I'm illiterate. And some of those early drafts are ugly. You don't always want the public to see how the sausage is being made. It would not improve your opinion of us. One thing, I guess, you've got two sides of this. You've got authors and you've got agents.
Hmm.
Did you ever yourself consider being a writer, or did you always want to be an agent?
I've written some stuff for fun.
Uh huh.
Like when I was in school, I did a lot of music reviews. I would go around with a camera, and it would pay for shows, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then I maintain a blog at literaryagentmarkgottlieb.com. I think I had interviewed you for an
Uh huh.
article and got great responses. So I do a little bit of blogging for fun on the side, but no serious or full-time writing. I mean, I have a lot of respect for folks like you and what you do because, I mean, I don't know how you do it you know, with the kids and everything in your day to day. And I'm amazed. Here we are, 7 books later. I think we just recently sold a book too to Nancy Paulson Books that imprint at Penguin Random House, a
Yeah.
children's picture book.
it's you know how I do it is I just never look back. I get done with this book today, and it's like you just I've already forgotten all of the pain that went into it. It's kind of like childbirth. They say that one of the reasons women are able to have more than one kid is their bodies like literally forget the pain they went through. Like they might remember it on an intellectual level, but they don't viscerally remember it until they're in the midst of it again. Because if you really remember that from time to time, everybody would stop at one kid. And I think it's pretty similar with books. I think if you really remembered all the agonizing hours, it would slow you down. And I've come up with some tips and tricks along the way. I've started using voice to text for the first draft. The first draft's always the hardest one to me. It just sucks to get the garbage words down to the blank page. But when I'm talking into my phone, that blank page is really small and I can go really fast, and that really cut out the hardest part for me. So that's been working well. Do you get much time to read for fun? Since I mean, reading is your job. I mean, do you get to do it at all for enjoyment?
I wish I got to do a lot more of reading for pleasure. I mean, I've read, probably read thousands of books between
Yeah.
what I've read for pleasure, what I've read for work and manuscripts and things like that. But it's really hard to find time to read because you finally lay down, you pick up a book, and then you just fall asleep.
You're describing my life. I've had to switch. I do entirely audiobooks now, and if I don't, not that I write, but when I'm listening to them, if it's not an audiobook, I can't do it. Because if it's an audiobook, then I can be doing the dishes or cleaning the house or ignoring the kids, and I feel productive. That's my saving grace there. Or exercising too when I've got the audiobook going. So yeah, I get that totally. But if I have to actually sit down and read it, it's like, yeah, it's not happening. And I feel terrible saying that as an author. I'm killing my own industry here. But hey, audiobooks are books too. I say if you listen to an audiobook, it counts as reading, and
Sure.
that's the hill I'm going to die on.
You gotta say that you've recorded your own audiobooks, which is a real coup in our industry. It's an extremely rare thing that an author gets to record their own audiobooks. Usually they need to be like almost like a professional voice actor and submit a sound reel. And I think that the audio publisher specifically sought you out and they thought, you were up to the task, and so you've recorded your own audiobooks. There are authors who hope for that their entire careers and never get that kind of chance. So it's great.
Well, I think it helps that I'm doing nonfiction. If you do fiction, I mean, definitely you have to have a real voice actor to do all the different voices. I guess unless you only have one character. But with me, I think part of it is my books are just so weird that it doesn't matter who reads it. It's only going to sound normal coming from me, though. You've got to have that default level of weirdness. And actually, to any authors out there looking to break in or record their own nonfiction audiobooks, one of the reasons I got that was because of my podcasts. The first audiobook publisher listened to the podcast. They said, okay, this guy can sort of talk. We can do that. And so again, the podcast was nothing that I ever made money on its own. I mean, you guys have heard it with Steve. It's a total waste of time. But indirectly, it led to me getting 3 audiobook deals where I sat down in the chair in front of that $1 million mic and I recorded it for 7 or 8 hours. So sometimes things might not seem like they lead to money right away, but just by putting content out there, it can lead to things down the road. I know agents wear a lot of hats, and I read about other authors. I'm kind of fascinated about their roads because they're all so different than the one I took. But it seems like agents have different styles and they're hands-on to different degrees. Now, with you and I, you don't do a lot of editing back and forth. I just kind of pass it on generally. Do you do a lot of editing with your other clients, or do you just kind of trust them to handle that and then pass it on to the editors at the publishers, since every publisher is going to have such unique editing tastes?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the needs of the individual manuscript and author. In your case, because you have such a distinct voice, we were talking about audiobooks before. That's why the voice comes through really well in your writing. There are instances where, gosh, I mean, I've written 12-page editorial letters, and then
Really?
yeah, and then there are instances where it's just like, hey, here are some bullet points, put them on a sticky, put them on the computer monitor, and then when you're going back through the manuscript, keep these ideas in mind. So sometimes a manuscript will come in and it's very tightly written, and then other times it needs a lot of work. Like, actually, one of my clients who writes epic fantasy, she had sent me her manuscript and it was 600,000 words.
Whoa.
And
Oh my God.
and I had to say, like, there could be 6 to 8 books here. And so
Man.
that had later on become more of an editorial process. And, but then again, there are other things which come in and they don't need it as much.
When you're looking for a writer, then how important is social media presence? So you got in touch with me pretty much entirely based on social media. How critical is that now? If somebody comes to you with no social media presence at all, is that a deal breaker, or does it just help tip the scale if it's close? Where does that factor in?
So, in the case of nonfiction, nonfiction is very um, idea driven, and it's about
Hmm.
the author being an authority on their subject matter and having a platform or a built-in audience, because publishers of nonfiction want to see authors who can go directly to their audience and ask them to buy their book, or if they do
Hmm.
speaking engagements around the country you know to get the audience buying the book. And so in
Yeah.
your case, James, when I approached you, I said, "Oh, a publisher's going to love this because you have so many social media followers. The publisher's thinking in their minds, if even if we just reach 10% of his social media followers, we're gonna still be in pretty good shape financially." So that's what's gonna,
Hey,
yeah.
if I could sell the 10% of my social media followers, I would be doing pretty well. I wish the numbers were that good, but yeah, it definitely helps to. I don't know how people without social media presences sell books. I don't. And for those of you wondering out there, yes, technically all of my books so far have been nonfiction. My parenting guide to the zombie apocalypse, nonfiction. Bare minimum parenting, how to not quite ruin your child, nonfiction. And now my book on how to save your child from ostrich attacks, accidental time travel, and anything else, also nonfiction. That nonfiction definition, extremely broad.
That's why I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, with your children's picture book forthcoming from Penguin, because you know, uh, I mean, it's still very early. Can we talk about it, James? Are you okay
Yeah,
with
go
that?
ahead. Yeah, absolutely. There are no secrets here.
The title is "You Can't Be a Pterodactyl," and I think it's a
Hmm.
really unique story you've written, and it'll be interesting to see how your platform can bolster a work of fiction, because fiction is so different from
Yeah.
nonfiction. It's so much more about the quality of the writing, and then the author, by extension of that, becoming a household name. Not to say that there isn't quality nonfiction. I mean, people come to fiction for different reasons than they do with nonfiction.
Do you? I guess I've heard of this happening once or twice. How often do you see it where somebody starts out and things putter out so fast that they have to create a pen name or a new pen name and start over? Is that something you've experienced, or is that something that doesn't happen in the industry so much anymore?
Not so much in the industry anymore. I mean, there's this women's fiction author, Nora Roberts. She writes like um, well, romance, and
Hmm.
she created like a line of suspense thrillers, but with romantic elements. And
Yeah.
because it was a different brand, she went under the name JD Robe. But the funny thing is, in the internet age, like there are no secrets, and so
Yeah.
people know it's her. And you know, I think it's really difficult for authors to go out there with a pen name, because people are going to find out. I mean, definitely the publisher will know, because
Yeah.
when it comes time to pay everyone or sign a contract, they're going to know. Um, but yeah, I've been finding that uh, pen names have become a lot more infrequent in the internet age, because you can't really keep that kind of thing under wraps.
What about MFAs? I'm fascinated by MFAs because I had no idea they were a thing. I went to such a small school, I didn't know a single person who got one. Do they help you or hurt you or not make any difference? Like when you see somebody send you
uh,
something and they say they've got an MFA, what's your reaction to that?
so much weight is placed on our industry, on these MFA programs, and it's a lot of money, unless you're going to really pursue writing in a really serious way, uh, where either maybe you're going down the road of getting a PhD and being a professor, or you know you really really want to try your hand at being like a very 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 serious novelist. Even then, it's a lot of money, and I find that with MFA programs, it's you get that badge of honor,
Mm-hmm.
and what it really amounts to is a lot of networking, and you sort of
Oh.
learn, yeah, a lot of how books are written. But I'm sure there's a lot of quality to it, but I think they place just too much emphasis in our industry on that. Like there are so many authors like yourself who,
Hmm.
you know, can write something at a thin air and make for a fantastic book. Like it doesn't
Hey,
doesn't require the MFA.
the unwashed, untrained masses out here. Well, I've heard, and again, I haven't gone through MFAs firsthand, but a lot of what they train you for in I forget what does MFA stand for? It's a Master of Fiction. I don't even know the full acronym.
Fine arts. Yeah.
Oh, Master of Fine Arts. Okay, I was completely wrong. But isn't it largely like literary fiction, kind of the esoteric kind of branch of it that doesn't necessarily sell all that well anymore, except for like the one or two bestsellers a year?
Yeah, a lot of it tends to be, yeah, more for literary fiction and some serious nonfiction, like people who I don't know, want to do the Malcolm Gladwell thing. Um,
Okay.
and uh, yeah, you're right. Literary fiction historically hadn't sold in very high numbers, but because of how weird things have gotten in book publishing with Amazon
Hmm.
and so much going the way of ebooks, that publishers are trying to find books that sell well in print. And literary fiction
Okay.
has always historically been read in print. And
So it's not just the number of sales they're looking for; it's the ratio. They want those paper book sales.
yeah, they want to protect their print business as much as they can. And a lot of literary fiction also travels really well overseas in getting
Okay.
translated and published. I know you've been translated and published in a bunch of countries at this point. Like you keep amazing me because it's like we have this publisher Atlantic Books in the UK and this editor there who like has a reputation for never buying anything. Like his tastes are very serious, right? Very serious
Yeah.
nonfiction or literary fiction. And then he buys your book. Like he loved it. You know, we
Yeah.
can't sell him anything else, but he wants your book.
It's a lot of people think I'm British. The ones who've never heard me talk, if they heard me talk, they'd instantly unfollow me. But and I guess I just kind of have that weird dry wit, so maybe that was the weird thing that appealed to him. Yeah, it's you. Thanks to you, we've got the book out there quite a few places. I don't know if I'll remember the whole list, but between the three of them, we've got it in South Korea. It's coming out in Spanish. It's coming out in. It already came out in French, and there's
Right.
the second one's coming out in French too. We got the UK edition, Portuguese, and Polish. I might be forgetting one in there. The Polish one keeps surprising me too. So Bare Minimum Parenting came out in Polish. They got real excited about it. They had the quickest turnaround that we've had on any of the foreign books. I've got a copy of it over there, but it's out of screenshot. But I keep on Instagram, people keep sending me screenshots of themselves reading it, and I can't read any of their messages because they're all in Polish. But it's like, okay, I guess somebody out there is reading it, and it's the weirdest experience because I've never been to Poland. I don't speak Polish. I didn't go there to print this book, and then somebody's over there holding this book that I supposedly wrote, and I just have to take their word for it that it's actually my book and not something completely different. But that's all thanks to you and your globetrotting ways. You just got back from the Frankfurt the Frankfurt Book Fair, right?
That's right, and we were pitching, more of your new books there to foreign publishers. Yeah, we go to Frankfurt, Germany, which is the kind of this gray place in October. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really industrial kind of banking city, but publishers from all over
Mm-hmm.
the world converge there. And we do hundreds of meetings. It's like speed dating, a meeting every half hour, and we just pitch publishers and try and get them to buy books and translate them, which is a huge cost because of the cost of translation. And
Yeah.
what's amazing about them having bought your books is, typically humor doesn't travel well overseas because from culture to culture, it's like they have
Mm-hmm.
such a weird sense of humor that certain things just don't
Yeah.
make sense to us. But there's like a big universality to a lot of your books over there, where I guess like everyone who's a parent,
Yeah.
can relate.
Yeah, thankfully kids are weird everywhere. Nobody has these normal children, and that kind of breaks the cultural barrier. You at one point, I mean, you've got it sounds like the coolest job in the world that you get to go over there and read books and talk to all these people. But at one point, that was your entire job. Like before you were a regular literary agent, weren't you like exclusively the foreign rights guy for Trident Media?
So, yeah, when I started at the agency, I started in the area of foreign rights where we
Mm-hmm.
were specifically, yeah, dealing with foreign publishers and yeah, trying to get our books published overseas, going to the places like the London Book Fair and the Bologna Book Fair in Italy, which is specific to children's books. It's a lot of work. It's a high volume business, but it's
Mm-hmm.
a great way to like learn the list of the agency, and it's a good boot camp for Trident where I work.
So, do you like to travel or do you not like to travel?
It's not easy to sleep on planes, but you catch up on movies. You always like see something or learn something kind of interesting. Like this past year, they moved us the agent center in Frankfurt. We're
Mm-hmm.
normally in like kind of like a big convention center. It's like a fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
You're in like a box all day. But this
Okay.
year they put us in this place called the Festhalle, which is like an old kind of amphitheater. And I opened up Wikipedia to read about the fest hall, what it was historically, because we
Yeah.
are in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out, they had rounded up a lot of Jews there
Oh, geez.
to,
The
yeah.
story went from funny to horrible really
Well,
quick.
it's kind of, I guess the funny part of it is what they did. The reason why they rounded up Jews there was to perform for Nazis, like kind of like
Oh,
Jewish
geez.
vaudeville. So, and then later on, they turned the fest hall into a storage facility for Nazi
Okay.
uniforms. And then
Oh,
after
wow.
that, it was bombed by the Allies. So you had this kind of strange karma that came about.
Yeah, I think that's probably the end history about everything in Germany. I read all kinds of World War II books or listen to the audiobooks, I guess, and I'm sure at every point pretty much everything in Germany has been flattened. For the record, Germany has not bought any of my books, and this interview is probably not going to help that any. If you are out there and you're a German publisher, we love you. Please buy my books and translate them.
Yes, please.
Well, if somebody is trying to break in today and write their first book, and they're sending you a query letter, what kind of book should they not write if they're trying to just start out right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many things you can do wrong and so few things you can do right. It's almost easier to say what you can do right, but I would say, you know, there are some people who write to me and they say, "I want to write a book. What do I do next?" Like,
Oh,
that's
geez.
not my job to sit there and like explain all that to you.
Hmm.
Or some people come to me and they say, "Oh, I have this great idea for a book," and they tell me about it. It sounds really exciting, and then I request the book proposal and sample chapters or the full manuscript if
Hmm.
it's fiction, and they say, "Well, I haven't written it yet."
Oh, geez.
Or, all kinds of things like that. I mean, gosh.
One great thing about nonfiction. So the divide here that he's talking about. When you write fiction, you've got to have the whole book finished beforehand, which is kind of risky. I
Yeah.
wrote one fiction middle grade book that didn't end up selling, and it's just you're out that time. I mean, unless I become super famous and somebody picks it up later. But the great thing about nonfiction is you can pitch it just based on a few chapters. We sold Only Dead on the Inside based on 3 chapters, I think, and then I finished the rest of the book after it sold, so there wasn't really any risk there. And as I've built up my relationship with Ben Bella Books, I've sent them less and less each time. This last one, I got this last book deal off a 1 paragraph email. So there's something to be said to staying loyal to the same
Hmm.
publisher. After a while, they start to trust you, and you can kind of get away with that. So it makes the process a little bit easier.
You'll be writing ideas on napkins in no time.
Yeah. Here's a post-it note. Give me a book deal. We'll see if I can get to that point. That would be amazing. Well, thank you for stopping by here tonight, Mark. It's fascinating to hear about that side of the industry. Are there any closing thoughts you want to leave everybody with?
No, I mean that's mostly, that's the window into what I do, and I'm really glad to have stopped by and spoken with you and everyone. I think it'll be exciting to see some of the books you're doing next, and yeah, now people kind of got a look at behind the scenes of your
Yeah.
publishing career.
Absolutely. And as a reminder to everybody, as if you needed to be reminded yet again, how to save your child from ostrich attacks, accidental time travel, and anything else that happens on an average Tuesday comes out November 5th. That's just 2 weeks from now, or probably slightly less than 2 weeks by the time I get this up. And Mark worked really hard to sell this book, so don't disappoint him. Don't buy it for me. Buy it for Mark. It's greatly appreciate it. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and then be sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll have lots more. I don't know, I'd say great content, but given how this is probably an outlier, I'll have lots more regular mediocre content coming your way. Thank you, everybody.